Let me tell you about a mistake I see people making every single day. A mistake that drains them, exhausts them, leaves them feeling hollow and misunderstood. It's the mistake of trying to explain themselves to people who have no capacity to understand them. You've done this. I've done this. We've all stood before someone, trying to make them see who we really are, what we really mean, why we do what we do. And we pour ourselves out, word after word, explanation after explanation, hoping that if we just find the right way to say it, they'll finally get it. They'll finally see us. But here's what actually happens. The more you explain, the more exhausted you become. The more you try to make yourself clear, the more confused the picture gets. And the person you're explaining yourself to, they're not getting closer to understanding you. They're getting more convinced of whatever story they've already decided to believe about you. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. Some people are simply not equipped to understand you. Not because they're stupid, not because they're bad people, but because understanding requires something that not everyone possesses. It requires the willingness to step outside their own experience, their own assumptions, their own need to be right. And most people, if we're honest, don't have that willingness. Think about it this way. Imagine you're holding a pearl, a real pearl, formed over years in the depths of the ocean, layer upon layer of beauty and complexity. And you're trying to sell this pearl to someone who only understands the value of glass beads. You can describe the pearl's luster, its rarity, the way it was formed. You can talk about its weight, its smoothness, the subtle colors that shift in different light. But if the person in front of you has only ever valued glass beads, if their whole understanding of worth is based on bright, cheap, obvious shine, then your pearl looks dull to them, unimpressive, not worth the price you're asking. So, what do? Do you spend hours trying to educate them about pearls? Do you exhaust yourself explaining why this quiet beauty is more valuable than flashy glass? Or do you simply understand that this person is not your buyer and you move on to find someone who recognizes what you're holding? Your soul, your true self, your authentic experience of life. This is the pearl. And every time you try to explain it to someone who doesn't have the framework to understand it, you're standing in front of the wrong buyer. I learned this lesson the hard way, and maybe you did too. I used to think that if people misunderstood me, it was my fault. I wasn't being clear enough. I wasn't explaining well enough. I needed to find better words, better examples, better ways to make myself understood. So I would try again and again, each time putting more effort into the explanation, each time hoping that this time would be different. And you know what happened? I got more and more tired. Because explaining yourself to someone who doesn't want to understand you is like trying to fill a bucket that has no bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. It never fills up. The bucket isn't broken. It's just designed wrong for what you're trying to do. There was a period in my life when I was going through something difficult, something that changed me fundamentally, and I tried to explain this change to certain people in my life. I tried to make them understand why I couldn't be who I used to be, why certain things that seemed fine before now felt impossible. I would spend hours in conversations, trying to find the right words, trying to make them see, but they couldn't see, or they wouldn't see. And the more I explained, the more they seemed to think I was being difficult, or dramatic, or selfish. They had their story about who I was supposed to be, and my explanations didn't fit that story. So, instead of changing their story, they decided I was the problem. And I kept trying. I kept explaining, because I thought If I could just make them understand, everything would be okay. They would support me. They would see me. They would know me. But here's what I finally realized. Understanding is not just about information. You can give someone all the information in the world, and they still won't understand if they don't want to. Because real understanding requires something more than just hearing words. It requires empathy. It requires curiosity. It requires the humility to admit that there might be experiences and perspectives outside of your own that are equally valid. And not everyone has those qualities. Not everyone wants to understand. Some people just want you to confirm what they already believe. Some people just want you to play the role they've assigned you in their story. And when you try to show them that you're more complex than that role, more nuanced than their simple narrative, they don't see depth. They see betrayal. This is not your fault. This is not a failure of your communication. This is a mismatch between what you're offering and what they're capable of receiving. Let me tell you about listening, because this is crucial. We think of listening as something everyone can do. You have ears, you can hear words, therefore you can listen. But real listening, the kind of listening that allows understanding, is actually quite rare. Real listening is active. It's generous. It requires you to temporarily set aside your own perspective and genuinely try to inhabit someone else's. Most people don't listen this way. Most people listen just enough to find a place to insert their own opinion. They listen for the pause, where they can jump in with their advice, their judgment, their story. They listen to confirm what they already think, not to discover something new. And you can tell the difference immediately. When someone is really listening to you, you feel it. You feel seen. You feel held. Your words land somewhere real. But when someone is just waiting for their turn to talk, when they're listening through the filter of their own agenda, your words disappear into the void. You're speaking, but nothing is being received. So here's what I want you to understand. Listening is a currency, and not everyone can afford what you're offering. When you try to explain your soul to someone who is not really listening, you're spending precious currency on someone who can't give you anything valuable in return. You're investing in a transaction that will leave you bankrupt. Think about your energy as a finite resource, because it is. Every time you explain yourself, you're using energy. Every time you try to make someone understand, you're spending from your account. And if you keep spending this energy on people who aren't listening, who can't understand, who don't want to see you clearly, you'll run out. You'll have nothing left for the people who actually can, to receive what you're offering. Nothing left for your own growth, your own peace, your own life. I watch people do this all the time. They exhaust themselves, trying to justify their choices to family members who will never approve. They drain themselves, trying to explain their pain to friends who are uncomfortable with vulnerability. They waste years, trying to make partners understand needs that those partners have no interest in meeting. And the saddest part is not just the wasted energy. The saddest part is what happens to the person doing all the explaining. Because when you keep offering your truth to people who reject it, something inside you starts to break. You start to doubt yourself. You start to think maybe there's something wrong with you. Maybe you are too sensitive, too complicated, too difficult. Maybe the problem is you, but the problem is not you. The problem is that you're trying to plant a garden in concrete. The soil is wrong. The conditions are wrong. It doesn't. No matter how good the seeds are, if the ground can't support growth. There's a story I once heard about a merchant who traveled through a desert village selling fine silk. The villagers had never seen silk before. They only knew rough cotton and coarse wool. When the merchant showed them his silk, they touched it and frowned. "This fabric is too smooth," they said. "It won't last. It's too delicate. What use is it?" The merchant tried to explain. He told them about how silk is made, about the silkworms and the careful process. He explained how silk drapes, how it feels against the skin, how it holds color in a way that cotton never can. But the villagers just shook their heads. They knew fabric. They had been wearing fabric all their lives, and in their experience, good fabric was rough and sturdy. This silk was clearly inferior. The merchant could have stayed in that village for years, trying to educate them about silk. He could have exhausted himself explaining, demonstrating, arguing. But he didn't. He packed up his silk and moved on to the next town. Because he understood something important. The value of what he was selling didn't depend on whether these particular villagers could see it. The silk was still silk, whether they appreciated it or not. Your authentic self, your true nature, your soul, this is like the silk. It has inherent value, but that value doesn't depend on whether everyone can see it. And trying to convince people who can't see it, who don't want to see it, who are more comfortable with their rough cotton understanding of the world, this is a waste of your precious energy. Now, I'm not saying you should never explain yourself. I'm not suggesting you should be closed off or refuse to communicate. What I'm saying is that you need to be selective. You need to discern who deserves your explanations and who doesn't. You need to recognize the difference between someone who is genuinely trying to understand and someone who is just gathering ammunition. Because there are people, rare but real, who will listen to you with open hearts, who will ask questions not to trap you, but to know you better, who will sit with your complexity without trying to simplify you, who will hold your truth even when it's different from their own. These are your people. These are the ones who deserve your pearls. And here's how you can tell the difference. Real listeners don't interrupt your story to tell you what you should have done. They don't minimize your experience by comparing it to something they went through. They don't offer quick fixes to complex problems. They don't get defensive when your truth makes them uncomfortable. Real listeners ask questions that go deeper, not questions that dismiss. They say things like, "Tell me more about that," instead of, "Have you tried this obvious solution?" They can sit with you in the mess without trying to clean it up. They can handle your honesty without making you feel like you need to protect them from it. These people are rare. When you find them, you'll know, because explaining yourself to them won't feel draining. It will feel nourishing. Your words will land in fertile soil, and something real will grow from the exchange. But most people are not these people. Most people will hear your words through the filter of their own fears, their own judgments, their own need to maintain their worldview. And no matter how clearly you speak, they will misunderstand. They will twist your meaning. They will make your truth about them. I once knew someone who would come to me with their problems, their confusion, their pain, and I would listen, really listen. I would try to understand. I would ask questions. I would sit with them in their difficulty. But when I tried to share my own struggles, when I tried to explain something I was going through, they would immediately make it about themselves. "Oh, that reminds me of when I," or, "Well, at least you don't have it as bad as," or, "Have you tried just not thinking about it?" And I kept trying. I kept hoping that if I explained myself better, if I was clearer, they would understand. But they couldn't. Not because they were bad, but because they didn't have the capacity. They could only receive the kind of listening they themselves were capable of giving. And what they were capable of giving was surface level, transactional, self-referential. When I finally stopped trying to make them understand, when I finally accepted that this person was not my audience, something shifted. I stopped feeling resentful. I stopped feeling misunderstood. Because I wasn't misunderstood. I was just misplaced. I was trying to explain myself to the wrong ears. This is the key insight. You're not misunderstood. You're misplaced. You're bringing your truth to people who don't have the capacity to hold it. And that's not a reflection of your worth or the validity of your experience. It's just a mismatch. Think about what happens when you stop trying to explain yourself to people who can't understand. Think about all that energy you get back, all that mental space, all that emotional bandwidth. You're no longer spending hours rehearsing conversations in your head, trying to find the perfect words. You're no longer lying awake at night, wondering why they can't see what seems so obvious to you. You're no longer twisting yourself into knots, trying to make your truth palatable to people who will never develop a taste for it. That energy, that space, that bandwidth, it becomes available for other things, for people who can actually receive you, for activities that nourish you, for growth that matters, for peace. And here's something interesting that happens when you stop over-explaining yourself. People's opinions of you stop mattering so much, because you realize that their opinions are based on their capacity to understand, not on your actual worth. Someone with a limited capacity for empathy will always see you as too sensitive. Someone who is afraid of change will always see you as too unstable. Someone who needs to feel superior will always see you as somehow lesser. But none of that is about you. It's about them. It's about their limitations, their fears, their needs. And you don't need to exhaust yourself trying to overcome their limitations. You just need to recognize them and move your energy elsewhere. This doesn't mean you become harsh or closed off. It doesn't mean you stop being kind to people. It just means you become strategic about your vulnerability. You become protective of your inner world. You stop giving everyone access to your depths when they've only proven capable of handling your shallows. There's a difference between being authentic and being indiscriminate. Authenticity means being true to yourself. It means not pretending to be someone you're not. But it doesn't mean sharing everything with everyone. It doesn't mean explaining your every thought and feeling to anyone who asks. That's not authenticity. That's a lack of boundaries. Real authenticity includes discernment. It includes the wisdom to know who can handle your truth and who can't. It includes the self-respect to protect your inner world from people who would misuse access to it. I think about this in terms of levels of intimacy. There are some things I'll share with almost anyone. Surface level stuff. Easy conversation. Then there are deeper things I'll only share with people who have proven they can handle that level. And then there are the deepest things, the most vulnerable parts of my soul, that I'll only share with the very few who have shown they can hold that kind of trust. And this isn't about being secretive or fake. It's about being wise. It's about understanding that intimacy is earned, not owed. It's about recognizing that your inner world is precious, and not everyone deserves a guided tour. When you try to explain your soul to the wrong ears, you're essentially giving intimacy to people who haven't earned it. You're trusting people with your depths who have only proven capable of handling your surface. And then you feel betrayed when they mishandle what you've given them. But the betrayal isn't really theirs. They never pretended to be capable of more. You just hoped they were. So what do you do instead? You observe. You pay attention. You notice who asks questions that indicate genuine curiosity. You notice who can sit with complexity. You notice who has empathy for experiences different from their own. You notice who makes you feel safe enough to be honest. And to those people, you can explain yourself. To those people, you can open up. To those people, you can show your depths. Because they have the capacity to receive what you're offering. They have ears that can actually hear. Everyone else, you can be kind to them. You can be polite. You can maintain relationships at whatever level works. But you don't owe them your depths. You don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them access to your soul. And when they misunderstand you, when they create stories about you that aren't true, when they judge you based on their limited perception, you can let them. You can let them be wrong about you. Because their wrongness about you doesn't change who you actually are. The silk is still silk, even when someone insists it's inferior cotton. This is incredibly freeing once you really get it. You stop needing everyone to understand. You stop trying to control how people perceive you. You stop exhausting yourself in endless explanation. You just live your truth and let people make of it what they will. Some will get it, most won't. And that's okay, because you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to live authentically, to grow, to connect deeply with those who can meet you at your depth, and to offer your gifts to those who can receive them. The wrong ears will never hear you correctly, no matter how loud you speak or how clearly you explain. But the right ears, they'll hear you even in your silence. They'll understand you even in your complexity. They'll see you even when you're not trying to be seen. So stop explaining your soul to people who are determined to misunderstand it. Save your words for those who have earned them. Save your energy for connections that nourish you. Save your truth for ears that can actually hear it. Because you're not misunderstood. You're just talking to the wrong people. And the moment you realize this, the moment you stop trying to make everyone see you and start focusing on being seen by the right ones, everything changes. You get your energy back. You get your peace back. You get yourself back. And that's worth more than being understood by people who were never your audience in the first place.